I used to think my biggest trading problem was strategy. So I kept searching for better indicators, sharper entries, more sophisticated tools. But the more I learned, the more I lost control, because no matter how refined my system became, I kept making the same mistakes. Breaking rules I swore I'd follow, chasing trades I knew I shouldn't take, sabotaging myself again and again. Until one day, someone asked me a question I couldn't answer. Who are you when you trade? Not what strategy you use, not what markets you trade, but who you are when the pressure hits, when the drawdowns come, when fear, greed, and doubt all scream louder than your plan. That question cracked everything open. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I hadn't built an identity. I was reacting, faking confidence, trying to perform like a professional while thinking like a rookie. And that disconnect, it was destroying me from the inside out. Then I learned about something called identity integration, and it changed everything. I realized you don't just need discipline, you need alignment between who you say you are and how you actually show up. Every hesitation, every emotional trade, every sabotage wasn't a failure of strategy. It was a fracture in identity, because under pressure, we don't rise to our goals. We fall to the level of who we believe we are. In this video, I'm going to show you how that belief system, the one running quietly beneath your trading decisions, is the real edge or the real enemy. And I'll walk you through the process I use to rebuild that identity from the inside out. No fluff, no hype, just the raw truth of what it actually takes to become someone who doesn't just trade the market, but masters themselves in the process. If you've ever felt like you were the one standing in your own way, this might be the most important video you'll ever watch. I didn't think I'd ever spend $8,800 on a single coaching program. Not on a vacation, not on a car, not even on a high-end trading system. But here I was, sitting in a quiet room, staring at the Zoom screen, waiting for Dr. Steenbarger to appear. The guy was a legend. He didn't just write about trading psychology, he lived inside it. He coached hedge fund managers, top-tier traders, people managing billions, and now I had 90 minutes with him, one-on-one. I was nervous, more nervous than I'd been placing a six-figure trade, because deep down I knew the problem wasn't my strategy, it was me. I'd been in the game for years. I knew technicals, I'd studied fundamentals, I had back-tested more systems than I could count, but I couldn't explain why I kept sabotaging myself, why I'd follow the plan for a week, then blow it all in one emotional trade, why I felt addicted to revenge trading, or why winning didn't even feel like winning anymore. I thought I needed another setup, another indicator. What I needed was a mirror, and Dr. Brett held it up to my face. He didn't start with tactics, he started with questions. Tell me about your best trade, he said. I told him. Now tell me about your worst one. I hesitated. The worst one wasn't about the money. It was the moment I broke my own rules. I saw myself spiraling, and I let it happen. He listened quietly. Then he said something I'll never forget. You don't trade the market, you trade yourself. That one sentence cracked something open. From there we went deep. He introduced me to a set of mental models, 8 of them. They weren't just abstract ideas, they were tools, weapons for the internal war I'd been losing. The first one was the observer mindset. He said, most traders react, the best ones reflect. He taught me to detach from my impulses, to create space between emotion and execution. Instead of asking, what is the market doing? I started asking, what am I doing in response to the market? I began journaling differently, not just charts or price levels, but thoughts, reactions, tensions in my body. The more I observed, the more I saw my patterns. The second model was the emotional trigger map. He had me track what triggered tilt, frustration, boredom. Turns out, it wasn't the losses, it was the injustice, feeling like the market was unfair. That realization alone saved me thousands. Then came the identity behavior feedback loop. He said, you can't behave differently until you believe differently about who you are. I was still identifying as a reckless, inconsistent trader because I had been one. So no matter how good my system was, I kept reverting. To change the outer behavior, I had to rewire the inner narrative. We worked on creating a new identity, one aligned with discipline, patience, resilience. It felt weird at first, like I was lying to myself, but over time my actions caught up. The fourth model was state before strategy. He asked, why do you think you can make a great decision from a terrible state? That hit hard. I used to trade tired, or pissed off, or after a fight with my girlfriend. He showed me how state affects perception, how stress narrows your thinking, and how recovery isn't optional, it's strategic. I started building a pre-trade routine, not just chart prep, but mind prep, breathing, music, even posture, tiny shifts, big difference. The fifth model was the growth frame versus performance frame. He said traders obsessed with outcomes stop evolving, but those obsessed with process grow exponentially. That flipped a switch. I stopped measuring success by dollars alone. I measured, did I follow my rules? Did I stay present? Did I respect risk? Ironically, when I cared less about profit, my P&L improved. The sixth model, the inner coach. Most of us have an inner critic. Mine was brutal. After every mistake, it tore me apart. Dr. Brett said, you'll never outperform your self-talk. We built a voice of the inner coach, curious, constructive, compassionate. Instead of, you're such an idiot, it became, what led to that impulse? How can we learn from it? I started speaking to myself like I'd speak to a teammate, not weaker, smarter. The seventh model was edge amplification. He said your edge isn't just the system, it's how you execute it. Two traders can run the same setup. One prints money, the other burns it. Why? Execution mindset, adaptability, focus, self-awareness. That's where the edge lives. We refined how I prepare, how I re-enter, how I walk away. Finally, the eighth model, purpose beyond profit. He asked, why do you trade? I paused. Money, freedom, ego. He challenged me to go deeper. What's the purpose behind this craft? I realized trading for me was a way to master myself, to test my psychology, to grow, to serve a bigger mission. When profit isn't the only reason, you stop chasing, you start building. That session ended, but something inside me had started. I'm not the same trader anymore, not because my system changed, but because I did. Those 8 mental models, they're not magic, they're not sexy, but they are real, and they work if you're willing to do the inner work. I paid $800 for that coaching call, but what I got was priceless. I didn't expect it to be so personal. I thought I was going to learn about market patterns, setups, or performance strategies. But when I sat with Dr. Brett Steenbarger, he didn't talk about charts. He talked about me, and not the trader me, the person behind the trades. He told me the models that work best aren't just frameworks for thinking. They're mirrors. They show you how you're operating, consciously or not. And that's exactly what happened. These mental models weren't designed to make you feel smart. They were designed to expose the invisible wiring that drives every click of the mouse, every trade, every emotional spiral. Let me tell you about the first one that changed me, the emotional mirror. Dr. Brett asked, how do you respond when things don't go your way? I paused. He continued, not just in trading, but in life. How do you respond to loss, frustration, disappointment? The truth hit me harder than I expected. I was carrying unresolved anger, not just from trading, but from life, and that anger was showing up in my trades. Revenge trading wasn't a trading flaw. It was a coping mechanism. That insight, just that, shifted the way I looked at every decision I made. Next, he introduced me to the second model, the pattern loop. He said, every trader runs loops, emotional, behavioral, psychological. Your job is to identify the loop, interrupt it, and rewrite it. He had me review my last 30 trades, wins and losses, not just the outcomes, but what led to them. And what I saw shocked me. I was stuck in a 3-phase loop. Hope, impulse, shame. Hope that this trade would be the one. Impulse to over-leverage or chase. Shame after blowing it. Rinse and repeat. No matter how rational I thought I was, the loop kept spinning until I became aware of it. And once I saw it, I could break it. The third model was perhaps the most humbling. The identity filter. Dr. Brett said, you'll always trade in alignment with how you see yourself, whether that's conscious or unconscious. And that crushed me, because deep down, I still saw myself as an undisciplined trader, a gambler, someone trying to prove something to the world. Even when I made money, I felt like a fraud. He had me write a new identity, one grounded in values, not ego, one that didn't depend on winning or losing, one I could earn every day. It wasn't about pretending, it was about becoming. Then came the fourth model, the inner conflict compass. Dr. Brett asked me, what parts of you want different things during a trade? At first I didn't understand, then it clicked. There was the part of me that wanted to follow the plan, and the part that wanted to feel something, excitement, relief, control. And those parts were always at war. This model taught me to notice the conflict instead of being consumed by it, to listen to both parts without letting either one hijack me. The fifth model was brutal in its honesty, the comfort saboteur. He said, "We don't sabotage because we're weak. We sabotage because we're loyal to comfort." That line punched me in the gut. Comfort had been running my life. Comfort of avoiding risk, comfort of avoiding boredom, comfort of staying in the emotional patterns I knew, even if they were destructive. I wasn't sabotaging out of fear. I was sabotaging out of familiarity. And to change that, I had to get uncomfortable. Every day. Then came the sixth model, the flow access key. This one was different. It wasn't about what not to do. It was about how to unlock the best version of myself. Dr. Brett said, "You can't force flow, but you can create the conditions for it." He walked me through the triggers, clear goals, immediate feedback, stretching just beyond your comfort zone. We redesigned my trading environment. We rebuilt my routines, not around control, but around readiness. And when it worked, when I hit that state of deep focus, smooth execution, zero hesitation, it felt like flying. Model 7 took that even further, the purpose anchor. He asked, "What keeps you grounded when the storm hits?" It wasn't rules, it wasn't profit targets. It was purpose. Why do I trade? What does success actually look like for me? What am I building toward beyond the next green day? That conversation changed my compass. It made me see that purpose isn't a slogan, it's an anchor. And when you forget it, you drift. The final model was the one that stayed with me most, the integrity mirror. He said, "Success without self-respect is just another failure." That hit me deeper than I wanted to admit. I had chased profits at the cost of peace. I had broken rules, lied to myself, compromised who I wanted to be, and even when I won, I didn't respect myself. This model brought it all back, trading as a mirror, a reflection of how much you honor your word to yourself. That was the line. From that day forward, I decided, I don't just want to be profitable, I want to be proud. And pride comes from living in alignment, from executing with integrity, especially when no one's watching. 8 models, 8 mirrors. Each one showed me a truth I had ignored. Each one demanded a decision. $8,800 felt like a lot, but what it cost me before that, emotionally, financially, psychologically, was far greater. Dr. Brett didn't just teach me how to trade better. He helped me become someone worth trusting in the moment that matters most, when it's just me, the market, and the next decision. And now, every trade I take, I don't just see the chart, I see myself. Clearly, and that clarity, that's the real edge. $8,800. That's how much I paid for a single coaching session with Dr. Brett Steenbarger. Most people thought I was crazy. Some laughed, others raised their eyebrows and asked, was it worth it? Let me answer that, not with a yes or no, but with a story. The story of how 8 ideas, shared over 90 minutes, shifted everything I thought I knew about trading. And more importantly, about myself. See, before that session, I thought I was close. I had a solid system. I understood the markets. I'd studied price action, volume, macroeconomics, but something was still broken, and it wasn't on the charts. It was in me. The profits were inconsistent. The confidence came and went. The discipline, fragile. One emotional trigger and it all collapsed. I didn't need more information. I needed transformation, and that's what Dr. Brett gave me. He didn't hand me magic formulas. He gave me mental models, simple, brutal, effective. And the moment I heard them, they made sense because I had lived them the wrong way. The first insight that hit me like a truck was this: you don't rise to the level of your knowledge, you fall to the level of your mindset. That line alone was worth $800, maybe more. It explained everything. Why I could make great calls one day and fall apart the next. Why I could follow my system perfectly for a week, then blow it all on one impulsive move. My problem wasn't strategy, it was state. And my mindset was reactive, emotional, scattered. Dr. Brett introduced me to what he called the mindset ladder. At the bottom, survival, trading out of fear, desperation, ego. In the middle, stability, following rules, managing risk, avoiding tilt. At the top, mastery, presence, precision, flow, detached execution. He said, where you trade on that ladder determines everything. And most traders, they don't even know what rung they're on. That was me. I thought I was stable. I was actually bouncing between fear and frustration, pretending to be composed. He showed me how to map my state before I traded, not after. not when I was already bleeding. That changed everything. The next model was something I'd never considered: impulse as data. I used to beat myself up after impulsive trades, the ones where I'd enter too early, size too big, exit out of panic. But Dr. Brett reframed it. He said, your impulses aren't mistakes, they're messages. He had me study them. When did they happen? What triggered them? What feeling was I trying to escape? Over time, I saw the pattern. Impulse wasn't about the trade, it was about the need to feel in control, to feel smart, to not feel helpless. Once I named those emotions, the impulses lost their power. Then came the decision audit. He asked, how many of your decisions are truly conscious? I said, all of them, I think. He smiled. We ran through 10 recent trades, and I saw it, clear as day. Only 3 of them were made with full awareness. The rest, they were reactions, habits, emotional reflexes. He taught me to create pause points, micro moments between trigger and action, moments to ask, am I trading my plan or my pain? That one habit added more consistency to my trading than any strategy ever had. Another model, emotional capital, financial capital. I'd never thought about it like that, but it's true. Emotional capital is what you spend when you trade under stress. It's the energy you burn when you're second-guessing, over-monitoring, overreacting. And when your emotional capital is drained, your decision-making goes out the window. Even if you still have money in the account, you're already broke, mentally. I started protecting that capital like my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. Dr. Brett then hit me with something I didn't expect. Your edge doesn't matter if your execution breaks down under pressure. It was harsh, but true. I had edge, but I also had breakdowns. So we worked on pressure mapping, what pressure felt like in my body, in my breath, in my thoughts, and how to reset in real time, not after the damage was done. Breathing techniques, micro releases, state resets, not sexy, but powerful. Then came the narrative flip. He asked me to describe a losing trade. I told him the story, all the frustration, the stupidity, the regret. He paused and said, now tell that story from the perspective of growth. I struggled, but I tried. I reframed the loss as a lesson, not a punishment. I saw what I could learn, how it exposed a blind spot, and something clicked. The story I tell myself after a trade becomes the belief I carry into the next one, and belief, good or bad, shapes behavior. From that point on, I started rewriting every trade, not sugarcoating it, but extracting value. Every loss became tuition, every mistake became data, and over time I stopped fearing failure. One of the last models he shared was this: integrity isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. That line stuck with me. I thought being a good trader meant never messing up. But he showed me it means doing what you said you'd do, being who you said you wanted to be, even when it's hard, especially when no one's watching. Trading isn't just a skill set. It's a mirror. It reflects who you are when pressure hits. And those 8 models, they didn't just help me trade better, they helped me live better. I paid $8,800 for that session. But what I got wasn't just advice, it was awareness, it was ownership, it was clarity. Now, when people ask if it was worth it, I don't say yes. I say, it was the best trade I ever made. I used to think success in trading was about finding the right system, the best indicators, the perfect entry. I obsessed over data. I ran back tests late into the night. But no matter how good my setups were, I kept slipping, emotionally, mentally, even physically. Until one day, I realized something painful. My biggest losses didn't come from bad analysis. They came from me trading in the wrong state. That's when I found Dr. Brett Steenbarger. I'd read his books, followed his blogs, but coaching with him was different. It was real, personal, brutally honest. During our session, he didn't ask me about my win rate or risk-reward ratios. He asked, what state are you in when you make your best decisions? I sat there, silent, because no one had ever asked me that, not even myself. I had always measured outcomes, not conditions, not internal readiness. He told me something I'll never forget. You don't need more discipline, you need better design. That was the start of everything shifting. He introduced me to a framework I now live by, a model I call state before strategy. Before that session, I used to think, I'll follow my system, I just need more willpower. But willpower is fragile, especially under pressure, especially in trading. What I needed wasn't more force, I needed structure. a system not just for my trades, but for me. We started by identifying my peak performance state. When do I feel calm? When is my mind sharp but not tense? When do I make fast decisions without second guessing? He had me review my best trades and journal not the trades themselves, but what I had eaten that day, how I slept the night before, what time I woke up, whether I exercised, how cluttered my desk was, what music was playing, whether I had rushed into the day or eased into it. And that exercise changed everything. I realized something crazy. My best trades had less to do with the markets and more to do with my nervous system. Clarity wasn't a result of a perfect chart. It was a result of internal coherence. Dr. Brett told me, you can't trade with calm if you live in chaos. So we built my pre-trade protocol. Not fancy, not long, but precise. 1, wake up at the same time, no alarms that shock me awake. 2, 10 minutes of movement, yoga, walking, or push-ups. 3, cold water on the face to reset my vagus nerve. 4, coffee after water, never before. 5 minutes of silence, just breathing. 6, review market context, not trades, just context. 7, read my why statement. 8, only then open the chart. It sounds simple, I know, but those 8 steps, they created consistency in a world where everything feels unpredictable. He also helped me create in-trade resets. Before, I would spiral. 1 red candle and I'd grip the mouse tighter. 2 red candles and I'd start overanalyzing. 3, and I'd break all the rules. Now I use what he called tactical breathers. He taught me how to notice the signs. Shallow breath, clenched jaw, racing thoughts. Those are my cues now, and when they hit, I pause, literally. I stand up, walk away from the screen. I do 3 slow breaths, not because I'm weak, but because I'm reloading. And when I return, I can see again, objectively, not through the lens of fear. Another part of the state before strategy model was my environment loop. Dr. Brett said, your physical space either supports discipline or erodes it. I used to trade with tabs open, phone buzzing, TV on in the background. It felt like multitasking. It was actually self-sabotage. We redesigned everything. I created what I now call my command center. Clean desk, only charts, no Discord, no news feeds, no noise, ambient music or silence, essential oils to anchor the state. Yes, it works. And a timer set every 60 minutes to check posture, hydration, and mindset, because if you don't manage your environment, it starts managing you. Then came the hardest truth. He asked, do you have rules for your strategy, but none for your body? That one burned, because I had pages of trading rules. But I slept 5 hours a night. I skipped meals. I stared at screens until my eyes blurred. And I expected to perform like a machine, but I was treating myself like one. We built new metrics, not just P&L, but physiology logs, sleep quality, HRV and resting heart rate, caffeine intake, hydration, mood rating, self-talk tone, and the correlation became obvious. My worst days almost always paired with poor recovery, overstimulation, neglected signals. Trading wasn't just cognitive, it was biological. The better I treated my body, the sharper my decisions became. But here's what really shifted everything. He said, you can't execute precision from a dysregulated nervous system. I'd never thought about my nervous system, but it runs the show. So we worked on regulation rhythms, micro rituals between sessions, walks in nature, no screens 30 minutes after a session, music, breath work, even laughter. Not productivity hacks, but recovery architecture, because a rested trader is a dangerous trader. And finally, Dr. Brett gave me this. The markets are chaotic. Your state must be the opposite. It became my mantra every day before every session. Now, before I click, I check me. Where am I? How do I feel? What's my posture? What's my breath doing? Am I here or distracted? And if I'm not ready, I don't trade. Period. Because I've learned no setup is worth it if I'm not in the right state. And funny thing, ever since I built this system around my state, my execution improved. My consistency skyrocketed, my stress dropped, my confidence solid as a rock, all because I stopped treating myself like an afterthought. $800, that's what I paid for that session. But what I got wasn't just 8 steps or clever phrases. What I got was a new standard. One where I don't rely on willpower, I rely on design. Where discipline isn't a grind, it's embedded in my space, in my rituals, in my breath, in my state. And now when I sit down to trade, I don't just prepare my charts, I prepare myself. That's the real edge. That's what changed the game. Forever. For most of my trading career, I measured everything by one thing: performance. Green days were good, red days were bad. If I made money, I felt proud. If I lost money, I felt like a failure. It was binary. Profit meant progress. Loss meant I was doing something wrong. That mindset, it drove me to chase, to force trades, to get frustrated at every setback. And slowly it turned trading from a craft into a constant scorecard. I wasn't improving, I was just reacting, chained to results I couldn't fully control. Then came my coaching session with Dr. Steenbarger. I didn't know it yet, but one insight he shared would flip my entire trading psychology upside down. He said, if you're obsessed with performance, you'll fear failure. But if you're obsessed with growth, you'll accelerate it. At first, I didn't fully grasp what he meant, but over the next hour, he walked me through what he called the growth frame versus performance frame. And that distinction changed everything. The performance frame, he explained, is outcome-driven. It's reactive, it's focused on validation. You're constantly judging yourself based on short-term results. In this frame, even a good decision can feel like a failure if the trade didn't work out, and that creates fear, hesitation, self-doubt. Sound familiar? It did to me, because that had been my entire mindset for years. But the growth frame, it's process-driven, it's resilient. It focuses on learning, feedback, and long-term mastery. In this frame, every trade, win or lose, is data. Every moment is training. Every day is part of the journey. Dr. Brett asked me, what if you stopped asking, did I win, and started asking, did I grow? That one question hit me like a truck, because honestly, I hadn't been growing. I'd been chasing, hunting for wins, avoiding losses, and judging myself every step of the way. I realized I wasn't even enjoying trading anymore. It had become a performance trap, a pressure cooker, and worst of all, it was self-imposed. So we started to rebuild. He had me create a new scorecard, not based on P&L, but on process. Each day I asked myself, did I follow my plan? Did I manage risk as intended? Did I notice emotional triggers and regulate them? Did I journal insights with honesty and clarity? Did I step away when I wasn't mentally sharp? Those became my new metrics. And slowly, something began to shift. I started trading freer, more focused, more present, because now I wasn't trying to be right. I was trying to be real, to be consistent, to become better. And that subtle shift, it changed the way I saw both success and failure. Before, a red day would ruin me. Now, it was just part of the curriculum. Before, I'd hide from mistakes. Now I dig into them, looking for clues, not shame. Dr. Brett called it turning pain into practice. Every emotion, every error, fuel for evolution. And the beauty of this mindset, it compounds. When you're in the performance frame, you obsess over today's number. But when you're in the growth frame, you build a foundation that pays you for a lifetime. He told me, traders who pursue growth become performers, but traders who pursue performance often stagnate. And that's exactly what I had been doing, chasing peak performance without building the base to support it. The growth frame changed more than just my trading. It changed the way I trained, the way I reflected, the way I approached life outside the charts. Because growth isn't something you do once, it's something you practice, deliberately, consistently. And here's the most ironic part. When I stopped obsessing over my results improved. I started stacking green weeks, not because I was forcing them, but because I was focused. I wasn't rushing entries anymore. I wasn't revenge trading. I wasn't bailing on setups halfway through. I was executing calmly, clearly, because my focus wasn't on winning, it was on refining. And refinement leads to mastery, slowly, quietly, powerfully. I began seeing trading as a mirror, not a scoreboard. What did this trade teach me? What emotion showed up? What belief did it challenge? What habit needs strengthening? I started writing those questions down after every session and reviewing them each week, not to judge myself, but to understand myself. That practice alone, it gave me more edge than any indicator ever did. The market became less of a battlefield and more of a classroom. Each price movement wasn't a threat, it was a teacher, a prompt. And I became a student again, curious, open, eager. That's the magic of the growth frame. It rehumanizes trading. It brings you back to intention. It lets you fall in love with the process instead of being chained to the outcome. Dr. Brett said one last thing before we ended our session. You can't control the market, but you can control the version of you that shows up to meet it. And that's what the growth frame gave me, the permission to show up, not as a performer under pressure, but as a learner building skill. Every day, every trade, every breath. $8,800 felt like a lot when I paid for it, but what I got wasn't just advice. It was a framework for sustainable improvement, for emotional freedom, for mental clarity. I stopped being a slave to results, and I became a builder of myself. Not perfect, not bulletproof, but always evolving. That's how I trade now, from the growth frame, and it changed the game forever. For the longest time, I thought the voice in my head was helping me, the one that screamed every time I made a mistake, the one that called me an idiot after a loss, the one that replayed every bad trade like a crime scene. I thought that voice was making me stronger, more disciplined, more accountable, but it wasn't. It was breaking me, bit by bit, trade by trade, day after day. I lived under the rule of what Dr. Brett Steenbarger calls the inner critic. And that voice, it doesn't coach, it condemns. I didn't realize how toxic it was until I sat down for a session with him. At first, I talked about my strategy, my losses, my inconsistency. I thought he'd tell me to tweak my system or adjust my risk management. Instead, he asked, "How do you talk to yourself after a loss?" I paused because I knew the answer, but I didn't want to say it out loud. I told him, "I get angry. I punish myself. I tell myself I should have known better." He nodded. Then he said, "You'll never outperform your self-talk." That line pierced right through me. He explained that the inner critic doesn't correct behavior. It fuels shame. And shame doesn't lead to discipline. It leads to sabotage. He said, "Your trading psychology will never rise above the way you treat yourself." That was the moment everything shifted. He introduced me to a model that would become a cornerstone of my growth, the inner coach, where the inner critic judges, the inner coach observes, where the critic shames, the coach teaches, where the critic says, "You messed up again," the coach says, "Let's understand what happened and how to grow from it." It sounded soft at first, too gentle, like I was going easy on myself. But then he said something that changed my entire perspective. Compassion isn't weakness, it's bandwidth. Because when you're consumed by self-hate, you can't think clearly, you can't adapt, you can't trade. So we started rebuilding my internal dialogue. After every trade, I asked 3 questions. 1, what did I do well? 2, what challenged me? 3, what can I improve next time? At first, it felt forced, unnatural, even fake, but I kept doing it, and slowly I noticed a shift. Instead of spiraling into guilt, I was stepping into curiosity. Instead of punishing myself, I was coaching myself, and that changed everything. The next step was catching the critic in real time. Dr. Brett had me practice awareness pauses, moments where I would stop, breathe, and listen. What was I saying to myself right now? Was it helping or hurting? And more often than not, I caught the critic mid-sentence. That snarky voice whispering, "You're about to mess this up. You're not focused. You don't belong here." But now I had a tool. I would interrupt it consciously and replace it with the voice of the inner coach. Breathe. You've been here before. Trust your preparation. Stick to the plan. Not affirmations, not delusion, just grounded, supportive reminders that brought me back into alignment. And here's the crazy part. The more I practiced this, the more resilient I became. Losses didn't derail me anymore. I could bounce back, refocus, execute, because I wasn't spending hours beating myself up. I was spending minutes learning and moving forward. Dr. Brett called this emotional efficiency, the ability to process emotions without being swallowed by them, to feel them fully, then channel them constructively. And that's exactly what the inner coach helps you do. It's not about ignoring pain, it's about metabolizing it, turning it into fuel, into insight, into growth. There was another practice he gave me, self-review without self-harm. I used to review my trades like a prosecutor, looking for proof of my stupidity, focusing only on what went wrong, tearing apart every poor decision. Now, I review like a coach, with context, with nuance, with the goal of refinement, not punishment. Instead of asking, "Why are you so impulsive?" I ask, "What triggered the impulse, and how can I catch it sooner next time?" Instead of asking, "Why did you screw up the exit?" I ask, "What emotion clouded your clarity, and how can I stay present next time?" That kind of reflection builds momentum. It builds trust with yourself, and trust, that's the currency of execution, because when you trust yourself, you don't hesitate, you don't second guess, you act cleanly. And let's be honest, no amount of edge matters if you choke in the moment. The inner coach helps you show up to that moment ready, clear, calm, capable. It doesn't make you perfect. No, it makes you progressive, always evolving, always moving forward. And that's what trading demands, not perfection, but presence and persistence. I used to think the harsh voice made me tougher, but now I know it just made me tired. What made me stronger was learning to lead myself, to coach myself, to speak with the same wisdom, patience, and clarity that I would give a friend or a teammate or a student. Because in the end, we are all students of the market. And the best traders I've ever met, they're not the most brutal with themselves. They're the most honest, the most curious, the most coachable, even when they're alone, especially when they're alone. $8,800 was a lot to pay for one conversation, but what I got from Dr. Brett wasn't just feedback. It was a new voice, a new mirror, a new standard. Now, every time I sit down to trade, I ask myself, who's in the driver's seat today? The critic or the coach? And if it's the coach, I already know I'm trading at my best. For a long time, I thought Edge was all about the system, the setup, the indicators, the statistics. I believed if I could just find the perfect entry, the flawless exit, the most optimized risk-reward ratio, I'd win. And for a while, I did okay. But then I noticed something that shook me. Two traders using the exact same strategy, on the same chart, at the same time, were getting wildly different results. One would thrive, the other would bleed. And more often than not, I was the one bleeding. That's when I started questioning everything. If the system wasn't the differentiator, then what was? I got my answer during a session with Dr. Brett Steenbarger. He looked me straight in the eye and said, your edge isn't just your strategy, it's how you execute it, under pressure in real time in the heat of uncertainty. That hit hard, because I realized my strategy had edge. I didn't. I wasn't executing consistently. I was hesitating, forcing, avoiding, overtrading. The system was fine, but the operator, me, was misfiring. That's when Dr. Brett introduced me to a concept that changed everything. Edge amplification. It's the idea that your true advantage isn't found in your entries and exits, but in how you show up to the trade. Your preparation, your awareness, your adaptability, your mindset. He said 2 traders with the same system will have opposite outcomes because edge lives in the execution. So we began dissecting my execution process. And what we found was brutal, but honest. I wasn't preparing properly. I was rushing into sessions, skimming my plan, reacting to the open, chasing FOMO. I was relying on my memory, not my structure. So we rebuilt it step by step. The first shift was redefining preparation as performance. He had me design a pre-market playbook. Every morning before the bell, I go through a structured process. Review my market context notes, identify key levels, visualize ideal setups, check my emotional temperature, write down 3 execution goals, and remind myself of my one job: follow process, not outcome. This created clarity before chaos. The second shift was mastering what he called the execution loop. He said, every trade has 3 phases: entry, management, and exit. But most traders only prepare for the first. That was true for me. I'd nail the entry, then fall apart mid-trade, panicking, doubting, micromanaging. So we designed protocols for each phase. Entry mindset, clear, measured, no FOMO. In-trade focus, 1-minute breath resets, posture checks, no external inputs. Exit discipline, predefined exit triggers, no justifications, no guessing. It sounds robotic, but in practice, it gave me freedom, because with structure, I didn't have to think emotionally. I could just execute. Then we tackled the third piece: state management during drawdowns. This was my Achilles heel. I could handle winners fine, but as soon as I hit 2 or 3 red trades, my brain flipped into panic mode. He explained that drawdowns aren't just financial, they're psychological destabilizers. They trigger doubt, fear, ego, anger, and if you don't manage those in real time, they compound the losses. He had me build what he called recovery loops, micro resets between trades, moments to pause, reflect, breathe, to ask, what's my emotional state right now? Is the next trade coming from clarity or revenge? Do I need to trade, or am I avoiding stillness? These loops saved me from spiraling. They helped me recover faster, regain composure, re-enter from strength, not impulse. The fourth area we worked on was something most traders never talk about: execution identity. He asked me, who are you when you trade at your best? Not what strategy I use, not what time frame I'm on, but who I am. how I think, how I feel, how I carry myself, how I speak to myself. We crafted a detailed profile. My peak mental state, my physical posture, my tone of voice, my breathing rhythm. And before each session, I now step into that identity consciously. I remind myself I am focused, measured, patient. I execute clean. I adapt. I don't chase. And when I lose that state, I stop, reset, recalibrate. Because edge isn't constant. You have to earn it moment by moment. Finally, he shared this. Most traders seek alpha in the market, but elite traders create alpha in themselves. That line hit different because it shifted the entire burden of performance back onto me, not in a guilt-driven way, but in an empowered way. If I could amplify my edge through preparation, presence, emotional regulation, self-awareness, then I didn't need to rely on the market to gift me profit. I could extract it because I was operating at my best. And here's the wild part. Ever since that session, I've made fewer trades, but my results have improved because my quality of execution has gone up. My decision-making is cleaner. My sessions feel calmer, more precise, less noise. I'm not trying to trade everything. I'm trying to trade only when I'm aligned. And that alignment, that's what edge amplification is all about. It's about building the internal systems in it that allow you to capitalize on the external opportunities. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's real and it works. So now when people ask me, what's your edge? I don't say RSI, I don't say breakouts or mean reversion. I say my edge is how I show up, how I execute, how I recover, how I regulate, how I adapt. Because in the end, markets are neutral, charts are available to everyone, setups come and go, but the way you trade, that's your fingerprint, that's your advantage. And now I know, amplifying that's what separates the average from the elite. That's what changed everything for me. It started with a question I couldn't answer. Not clearly, not honestly. Dr. Brett looked at me during our session and asked, "Why do you trade?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. At least not the real ones. I could have said money, freedom, independence, control. All of those were true on the surface, but the silence in that moment told me they weren't enough. He waited, then said quietly, if your only purpose is profit, then every loss will feel like failure, and every win still won't feel like enough. That landed like a punch to the gut, because deep down, I already knew it. I had made money, I'd hit my goals, crossed 6 figures, even flirted with 7, but I still felt empty, still felt anxious, still felt like I was chasing something I could never quite catch. That's when he introduced me to one of the most powerful models I've ever learned, purpose beyond profit. He said, traders who trade only for money are the ones who burn out fastest. The ones who last, they anchor their work in something deeper. So we started peeling back the layers. He asked, when did you first become obsessed with markets? What did it give you that nothing else could? What does trading mean to you beyond dollars? At first, my answers were generic: freedom, flexibility, challenge. But as we went deeper, I found something surprising. Trading, for me, was never really about the money. It was about mastery. It was about proving to myself that I could be disciplined, that I could stay calm under pressure, that I could outgrow the chaos I came from. It was about control, not over the market, but over me. Suddenly, so many things made sense. Why I spiraled after small losses, why I overtraded when I felt emotionally off, why even big wins didn't satisfy me for long. Because I had confused profit with purpose. And without a clear purpose, every trade became a test of my worth, a verdict, a judgment. That's an unbearable weight to carry. No wonder I kept breaking down. Dr. Brett said, purpose isn't about adding pressure. It's about giving your efforts meaning so you can stay grounded when things shake. So we began crafting my purpose statement. Not a slogan, not a motivational quote, but a clear articulation of why I show up to the screen each day. Here's what I wrote. I trade to master myself, to become the kind of person who can navigate uncertainty with clarity, respond to chaos with calm, and pursue with courage. Trading is my training ground, a mirror, a teacher, a path. Reading that every morning changed how I approached the session. I wasn't just there to make money, I was there to build someone I could respect, someone I could trust, someone who didn't need perfect outcomes to feel complete. That shift did more for my consistency than any strategy I've ever used. When I anchored into purpose, I stopped chasing, I stopped panicking, I started executing. Because now, a red day wasn't a failure, it was feedback. It was part of the training. And green days, they weren't validation, they were evidence that I was on the right path. One of the most powerful things Dr. Brett shared was this: when profit becomes a byproduct of purpose, you trade with freedom. But when profit is your only purpose, you trade with fear. I had been trading with fear for years. Fear of not being good enough, fear of missing out, fear of being exposed, fear of losing what I didn't even really value. But with purpose, that fear started to dissolve because my worth was no longer tied to my results. It was tied to my intentions, to my process, to how I handled adversity, not just how I chased reward. That's when I started journaling differently, not just about entries, exits, and setups, but about how I showed up. Did I stay true to my purpose today? Did I honor my values under pressure? Did I trade like the person I'm becoming? Those questions recentered me every time I drifted. And drift still happens, because the market has a way of pulling you off course. But now I have an anchor, something no candle pattern can shake, something no loss can erase. I even changed the way I define success. Success isn't green, success is growth. Success is following my plan in a tough session. Success is walking away when I'm emotionally compromised. Success is logging a mistake and learning from it without shame, because that's what builds the long game. That's what makes this sustainable. Purpose didn't just save my trading, it made me fall in love with it again. It reminded me why I started, why I'm still here, why I'm not going anywhere. And on the days when it gets hard, when I want to force trades or break rules or quit, I go back to that statement. I read it and I remember, this isn't just about charts and candles, it's about character. And I get to shape mine, one trade at a time. $8,800 was a steep price for a coaching session, but the lesson I took away, it was priceless. Because now, every time I sit down to trade, I know exactly why I'm here. Not just to win, not just to make money, but to grow, to evolve, to build a self I can be proud of. That is my true edge, and no drawdown can take that away. I used to think my trading edge was fixed. Either I had it or I didn't. Some days I felt in control, precise, calm, surgical. Other days I was sloppy, reactive, all over the place, and I couldn't understand why. Same system, same market, same setups, but two completely different versions of me. One version executed with clarity, the other chased, froze, or forced trades. It felt like a mystery, until Dr. Brett Steenbarger unraveled it in one sentence. You don't just need edge in your strategy, you need edge in your state. He called it state-dependent execution. It means your ability to trade isn't just about what you know, it's about the you who shows up to apply it. That was the day I learned about amplifying the operator, not the system, not the setup, not the tech, me. Dr. Brett said, the greatest variable in your trading performance is you. So the smartest traders, they train the operator just as much as the system. And suddenly all my inconsistency made sense. I had invested thousands of hours in market research, but almost none in managing the one person who pulls the trigger. So we got to work. We started building my operator profile. He asked me, when you're trading at your best, who are you? Not what are you doing, but who are you being? What's your focus like? Your breathing, your body language, your thought process, your energy level, your intention behind every action? At first, I struggled to answer, but as we reflected on my best trades, patterns started to emerge. When I was performing well, I was composed, my breathing was slow, my shoulders relaxed. I spoke to myself like a teammate, not a judge. I felt like a sniper, not a gambler. I turned those into activation cues. Before every session, I run through a checklist, not of charts, but of myself. Am I grounded? Am I breathing slowly? Is my self-talk encouraging or frantic? Am I here to prove something or to execute with precision? If I'm not aligned, I don't trade. That rule alone has saved me more money than I can count. Because it's not just about having edge, it's about being in the state that allows you to express it. Dr. Brett calls it readiness protocols. Olympic athletes don't perform without warming up. Why should traders? So we built mine. 10-minute walk before screen time. Breath work to reset my nervous system. Review of my peak identity and purpose. A final question, am I the operator right now or the observer? If I'm the operator, I engage. If not, I watch, I wait, I don't force. This alone created more precision in my trading than any new tool ever had. But it didn't stop there. Dr. Brett had me monitor something I'd never tracked before: state degradation. He asked, what causes you to lose your edge mid-session? Not just technically, emotionally, mentally, physically. I started noticing the patterns. When I overcaffeinate, I get jumpy. When I skip meals, I get irritable. When I have too many tabs open, my mind fragments. When I haven't exercised, I get impulsive. When I haven't slept, I hesitate and doubt myself. Each of these became a flag, a signal that my operator state was eroding. And if I didn't catch it early, I would sabotage good trades, miss entries, exit too soon, take setups I shouldn't. Now, I track my energy and focus every 30 minutes. Quick body check, quick breath scan, quick reflection, and if I drop below a threshold, I pause, reset, walk, breathe, recover, because no trade is worth operating from a compromised state. We also added what he called recovery protocols. After the session, I used to just close the laptop, done, but the day didn't end there. The psychological residue lingered. Wins inflated me, losses haunted me. Now I decompress on purpose, journal the session, review my state across time blocks, write one thing I did well, one thing I'll improve, visualize showing up again tomorrow, clean. Dr. Brett said, how you close the session determines how you open the next. And he was right. These micro-rituals started compounding, day after day, week after week. And I began to see something I had never seen before. Consistency. Not just in my performance, but in myself. I was becoming someone I could rely on. Not perfect, but present. Not flawless, but focused. Not rigid, but resilient. Because I wasn't trying to change everything, I was changing the one thing that changes everything, the operator. That became my edge. Not a setup, not an indicator, not some secret sauce. Just me, at my best, on purpose, by design. And the market, it started responding, because when you're sharp, you don't need to trade as much. You don't second guess, you don't overreact, you just execute. Clean, calm, consistent. Now, before every session, I don't just ask, what's the market doing? I ask, am I ready to trade as that version of me? If the answer is yes, I proceed. If it's no, I wait, because edge is earned, not just in research, not just in setups, but in the state you bring to the moment. $8,800. That's what I paid for that coaching session. But what I gained was access to the most powerful part of trading I had never trained, myself. And now I trade with a new belief, one that guides me every day. Amplify the operator, and everything else follows. There was a moment, right after a losing streak, when I nearly quit. Not because I didn't love trading, but because I didn't know who I was anymore inside of it. I had started to question everything. My system, my mindset, my purpose. I didn't know if I was just burned out or broken, but something had to change. That's when I scheduled my session with Dr. Brett Steenbarger. I had followed his work for years. His writing always struck a nerve, but I never expected what happened in that one conversation to shift the way I think about performance, identity, and mastery forever. In that session, he introduced me to something I'd never heard of before: identity integration. He said, you don't become a master trader by adding more knowledge. You become one by integrating your knowledge into your identity. That one sentence hit harder than any trading lesson I'd ever learned, because I realized I didn't have an execution problem. I had an identity problem. I was treating trading like a task, not a reflection, not an extension of who I am. And because I didn't own the identity of a consistent, calm, focused trader, I kept acting out of alignment with it. Dr. Brett told me, you act according to who you believe you are, especially under pressure. And under pressure, I reverted. Back to old habits, back to fear, back to proving, forcing, avoiding. So we began the process of what he called identity alignment. He asked me to write down in vivid detail who I am when I trade at my best. Not my stats, not my strategy, but my state, my values, my behaviors, my mindset. It sounded something like this: I am calm, focused, deliberate. I trade with precision, not emotion. I respect my process even when it's boring. I lead with discipline, not urgency. I detach from outcomes and stay grounded in skill. Then he asked, do your daily behaviors reflect that identity? The answer was no, not consistently. I had flashes of that person, but I wasn't living as him, not yet. So we built what he called the integration protocol, a simple, powerful practice to bridge the gap between who I was being and who I wanted to become. Each morning before I sat down at the screen, I reviewed that identity, read it aloud, felt it in my body, visualized what that version of me looked like, how he sat, how he breathed, how he responded to red candles and temptation. I wasn't faking it, I was training it. Because repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity becomes embodiment. The more I rehearsed that identity, the more it became default. But identity isn't just mental, it's behavioral. So we created what Dr. Brett called micro-alignments, tiny, intentional actions that reinforce the identity throughout the day. Things like pausing before every trade to breathe, journaling wins without ego, reviewing mistakes without shame, logging moments when I stayed aligned under pressure, celebrating process-based wins, not just profitable ones. Each micro-alignment was a signal, a vote, a small act of saying, this is who I am. And over time, those votes added up. They formed a new self-image, one built on evidence, not hope, not affirmation, but proof. One of the biggest shifts came when we talked about failure. I used to see failure as an identity threat. Every loss was a reflection of my incompetence. Every mistake was a character flaw. But Dr. Brett reframed it completely. He said, masters don't avoid failure. They integrate it into their identity. It becomes part of what makes them great. That changed everything. Now, when I take a loss, I ask, what does this teach me about who I'm becoming? Instead of shrinking my identity, failure started to shape it, refine it, deepen it. I no longer felt like an imposter when I made a mistake. I felt like a craftsman, getting sharper through friction. Another powerful moment came when Dr. Brett asked me, what's the story you're telling yourself about who you are in this career? At first, I didn't have a clear answer, but that question haunted me in the best way, because I realized I'd been telling a fragmented story. Sometimes I was a professional, other times I was a hopeful amateur. Sometimes I was a disciplined executor, other times I was a gambler in disguise. There was no cohesion, so I rewrote the story. Not a fantasy, not a hype reel, but a real, grounded narrative. I am a performance-driven trader who uses the market as a mirror for mastery. Every session is a chance to train. Every decision is a chance to deepen trust. I am here for the long game, to grow, refine, and evolve into the sharpest version of myself. Reading that story daily reconnected me with meaning. It reminded me that trading isn't just a job, it's a path, a reflection, a spiritual dojo even. It became less about winning trades and more about winning with integrity. That's what identity integration gave me. Not perfection, but coherence, a self that's aligned from the inside out. And the results, they followed. I wasn't just making better trades, I was making better decisions, more clarity, more confidence, more stability. Because when your identity is clear, your actions stop contradicting themselves. You stop acting out of fear, you stop overcompensating, you stop reacting to the past, and you start responding from a place of grounded ownership, $8,800. That's what I paid for that session. But what I gained was something I couldn't buy anywhere else. Not a strategy, not a shortcut, not a system, but a deeper sense of self, one that could withstand volatility, one that could grow under pressure, one that could make trading sustainable and deeply fulfilling. Now, when I step into the market, I'm not searching for identity through results. I bring my identity to the session and let the market reflect it back. That's the difference. That's the shift. Not trading from the outside in, but from the inside out. That's identity integration. And it changed everything. If this video resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you were the one sabotaging your own trades, then I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever caught yourself breaking your own rules, even when you knew better? Have you ever felt that disconnect between your trading knowledge and your actual execution? Share your experience. Your insight might help someone else going through the exact same thing. Tell me, what version of you shows up when things get tough in the market? And more importantly, who do you want to become? This isn't just about strategies or technical setups. It's about identity, self-mastery, and becoming someone who can navigate chaos with clarity. So drop a comment below. Let's talk about what identity means to you as a trader. Whether you're just starting or deep into your journey, your voice matters. And if this content helped you see things differently, let me know what stood out the most. I read every single comment, and I respond. Let's grow together.